Unravel the mystery of Sarah's disappearance with Midnight Murmurs. Follow Emily's dangerous journey as she uncovers the truth behind the criminal underworld. Like and subscribe to join the investigation and never miss a clue. Chapter 1: The Disappearance. Emily stood on her balcony, looking out over the sprawling city below. The sun was shining down on her face, warming her skin and brightening her mood. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, enjoying the peace and quiet of the morning. But her peace was short-lived. She opened her eyes and glanced down at her phone, which had been buzzing with missed calls and text messages all morning. She frowned as she saw that most of them were from her friend Sarah. Sarah was Emily's closest friend, but she had been acting strange lately. She was always canceling plans at the last minute, and she seemed distracted and distant when they did get together. Emily had tried to talk to her about it, but Sarah always brushed her off. Today, however, was different. Sarah's messages were urgent and frantic, and Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding as she read them. "Emily, you have to come over. It's an emergency," read the first one. "Please, Emily. I need your help," read the second. Emily's heart began to race as she read the messages. Something was definitely wrong. She quickly dressed and headed out to Sarah's apartment. As she walked, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The city seemed to be buzzing with a strange energy, and she could sense that people were on edge. She wondered if it was just her imagination, or if something really was happening. When she arrived at Sarah's apartment building, she saw that it was surrounded by police cars. Her stomach dropped as she realized that something terrible had happened. She hurried inside and was stopped by a stern-looking officer. "Sorry, ma'am, you can't go up there. We're investigating a missing persons case." Emily's heart sank. "Who's missing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The cop looked at her kindly. "Sarah Montgomery. She departed sometime yesterday night." Emily's legs grew weak and she had to support herself against the wall. Sarah was missing? It couldn't be real. She had just been messaging her this morning. The officer escorted her to a waiting room where Detective Jameson was waiting for her. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with piercing blue eyes and a severe demeanor. Emily could see that he took his job extremely seriously. "Miss Thompson, I'm Detective Jameson. I'm heading up the inquiry into Sarah's disappearance." Emily nodded, her mind racing. "What happened? Do you have any leads?" Jameson shook his head. "No, we don't. We've talked to all of Sarah's friends and co-workers, but no one has seen or heard from her since last night. It's like she just vanished into thin air." Emily felt a knot building in her gut. "What can I do to help?" she inquired, attempting to keep her voice calm. "We'll need to ask you some questions regarding your connection with Sarah," Jameson answered. "But first, I need to tell you that this is going to be a difficult and emotional procedure. We need to be thorough and we need to pursue every clue, no matter where it leads us. Emily nodded, her heart beating in her chest. She realized that this was going to be a long and arduous path, but she was determined to find out what happened to her buddy. During the course of the chapter, Emily and Jameson probe further into Sarah's life, questioning her friends and coworkers and rummaging through her items for clues. Emily is startled by how little she truly knew about Sarah, and she begins to unearth some unpleasant facts about her friend's history. We witness Emily's character improve as she gets increasingly motivated to solve the riddle and find her companion. She becomes more forceful and proactive in her hunt, asking more questions and pressing Jameson to pursue every clue. As the chapter develops, we also observe the world construction of the city and its residents. Emily detects the tension and dread in the air, and we witness glimpses of the city's darker underbelly as she visits shady pubs and interviews less than reputable personalities. The discourse throughout the chapter is extensive, with Emily and Jameson interviewing witnesses and putting together information. We witness their personalities clash at times, as Emily feels dissatisfied with Jameson's tight devotion to protocol and Jameson becomes unhappy with Emily's impulsiveness. The tempo is purposefully sluggish, with the concentration on building up the environment and people. By the end of the chapter, we still don't know what happened to Sarah, but we have a clearer idea of the people and places surrounding her disappearance. Emily is left feeling fatigued and emotionally drained, but she knows that she can't give up on her buddy. When she exits the police station, she can't help but feel a sense of discomfort. She understands that the path ahead is going to be long and painful, but she's determined to unearth the truth and bring Sarah home. Chapter 2: Uncovering Secrets. Emily woke up early the next morning, still feeling fatigued from the events of the previous day. She had spent much of the night tossing and turning, unable to shake the sensation of discomfort that had settled deep in her belly. She realized that she had to do something, anything to find her lost companion Sarah. She promptly got ready and walked out to Sarah's employment, intending to meet with her coworkers and discover more about her friend's life. When she entered the building, she couldn't help but marvel at the sleek, futuristic architecture of the lobby and the high-tech security systems in place. She signed in at the front desk and was taken to Sarah's section. Emily was met by Sarah's colleagues, who were plainly concerned by her departure. They characterized Sarah as a conscientious and loyal employee who kept to herself, but they couldn't give any clear information about what could have happened to her. They claimed that Sarah had been working on a top-secret project for the corporation, but owing to confidentiality agreements, they were unable to disclose any additional details. Emily took notice of this and started to explore more into Sarah's work. She thanked the colleagues for their time and made her way out of the building, her mind racing with thoughts. She walked to a local coffee shop and ordered a big coffee, sitting down at a table in the corner. She got out her laptop and began to explore internet forums and message boards, attempting to gather whatever information she could on the firm and Sarah's initiative. She spent hours looking over forums and articles, her eyes getting hazy and fatigued. Finally, she stumbled across a post from someone claiming to be a former employee of the organization. The article stated that the corporation had been participating in unethical tactics and that Sarah may have been involved. Emily's pulse raced as she read through the post, her thoughts racing with the ramifications. She realized that she had to move soon, but she wasn't sure what to do next. She decided to call out to Detective Jameson, the primary investigator on Sarah's case. She sent him an email explaining the facts she had obtained and requested for his aid in studying the firm and its policies. Later that day, Emily received a message from Jameson. He thanked her for the information and requested her to come to his office to discuss the situation further. She swiftly made her way to the police station and met with Jameson, who was poring through a stack of paperwork. "What did you find out?" he questioned, looking up at her. Emily took a deep breath and proceeded to describe what she had learned. She showed him the post she had found and explained how it hinted that the corporation had been involved in unethical actions. Jameson listened closely, nodding sometimes and taking notes as she spoke. After she finished, he sat back in his chair and grimaced. "This is alarming," he remarked. "But we don't have enough evidence to make any allegations yet. We need to examine deeper." Emily nodded, feeling a sense of relief that Jameson was taking her seriously. She realized that they had a long road ahead of them, but she was determined to see it through. For the following few days, Emily and Jameson worked together to unearth additional information about the corporation and its top-secret project. They questioned previous workers, searched through financial data, and probed deep into the company's background. Along the road, they met a lot of challenges and setbacks, including being stonewalled by the company's legal staff and getting threatening threats from unknown sources. Despite the hurdles, Emily and Jameson continued, propelled by their passion to learn the truth. When they probed deeper into the inquiry, they unearthed a labyrinth of lies and corruption that went much beyond what they had first believed. They discovered that the corporation had been illegally disposing of hazardous garbage and covering it up, putting the health of the local population at jeopardy. They also uncovered evidence that Sarah had been aware of the company's unethical activities and had been attempting to expose them before her disappearance. Emily and Jameson were both appalled by what they had found, and they realized that they had to act immediately before more harm could be done. They gathered all the information they had acquired and presented it to the right authorities, culminating in a complete examination of the firm and its activities. Meanwhile, Emily continued to struggle with the weight of Sarah's disappearance and the knowledge of what her friend had been involved in. She spent many restless hours worrying about Sarah and what may have happened to her, and she felt bad for not having done more to assist her while she had the chance. As the inquiry proceeded, Emily and Jameson drew closer, creating a deep relationship as they worked together to unearth the truth. They exchanged stories of their pasts and their personal troubles, and Emily found herself opening up to Jameson in a manner she never had before. She was astonished to realize that he was an excellent listener and attentive to her feelings. Through their chats, Emily started to realize that she needed to let go of her guilt and focus on finding closure for Sarah's family and friends. She started to come to grips with the notion that she couldn't undo the past, but she could make a difference in the present by fighting for justice and holding those involved accountable for their acts. When the chapter drew to a conclusion, Emily felt a fresh sense of purpose and drive. She knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous, but she was ready to face it head-on, with Jameson at her side. Together, they would continue to investigate the mystery of Sarah's abduction and bring those guilty to justice. Chapter 3: Delving Deeper. Emily sat at her computer, her fingers pounding across the keyboard as she peered at the screen in front of her. She was deep in thought, considering everything she had learned about Sarah and the company where she had worked. It was evident that Sarah had been working to unearth the truth about the company's operations, and that her disappearance was likely tied to her research. Emily knew that she had to continue the search for Sarah, even if it meant delving deeper into the seedy underbelly of the city. She had a feeling that there was more to the story than what she had already uncovered, and she was determined to uncover the truth. She took a deep breath and picked up her phone, dialing Jameson's number. He answered on the third ring, his voice gruff and professional. "Detective Jameson," he said. "Hi, it's Emily," she said. "I was wondering if we could meet up again. There's something I want to address with you." There was a little hesitation on the other end of the telephone, and then Jameson answered, "Sure. I'm free this afternoon. How about we meet in the park?" "Sounds wonderful," Emily remarked. "I'll see you there." She hung up the phone and let out a sigh. She realized that Jameson was the only one she could trust at this time, and that their relationship was the only thing that was preventing her from losing her sanity. When she headed to the park, Emily felt a sensation of worry settle in her stomach. She knew that the reality was going to be nasty, and that it was going to be tough to confront. Yet she also realized that she couldn't back down now. As she got at the park, Jameson was already there, sitting on a seat, and looked off into the distance. He looked up as he heard her arriving and stood up to meet her. "Emily," he remarked, nodding in welcome. "What did you want to discuss?" Emily took a deep breath and sat down next to him on the bench. She looked around nervously, as if someone might be watching them. "I've been doing some more digging," she said finally. "And I think I've found something that might be relevant to Sarah's disappearance." Jameson raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead," he said. "Well," Emily continued, "I was checking into the company's financials, and I noticed some irregularities. There are some really substantial charges that don't appear to have any reason." Jameson leaned closer, his gaze narrowing. "What type of expenses?" he inquired. "Expenses for stuff like security and surveillance equipment," Emily remarked. "It appears like the corporation was spending a lot of money on things that they shouldn't have required." Jameson stroked his chin thoughtfully. "That's fascinating," he remarked. "Do you have any clue where this equipment may be?" Emily shook her head. "Not yet," she responded. "But I have a sense that if we can discover it, we might be able to unearth something." Jameson rose up, extending his legs. "All right," he said. Let's start looking. I have some contacts in the tech field who could be able to help us out." During the following 2 days, Emily and Jameson worked feverishly to find down the company's security equipment. They toured facilities, checked through computer systems, and even talked to some of the company's former employees. It was slow work, and there were times when Emily felt like they were never going to discover anything. Yet she continued pushing, kept digging, and soon they struck pay dirt. They uncovered a warehouse on the outskirts of the city that was owned by the corporation and was being utilized to store their security equipment. Emily and Jameson parked their car a few blocks away and approached the warehouse on foot, hoping to seem inconspicuous. The warehouse was encircled by a chain-link fence, but there was a little opening towards the back where they might slip through. They crawled through the gap and made their way inside, attempting to be as quiet as possible. The inside of the warehouse was dimly lighted, with rows of shelves reaching out in front of them. Emily and Jameson split off, each choosing a separate aisle to search. Emily perused the shelves, her eyes leaping from one piece of equipment to the next. She had no clue what she was looking for, but she knew that it had to be there someplace. And then she saw it. Hidden down on the bottom shelf of one of the aisles was a little box with the company's emblem on it. She bent down and grabbed it up, her pulse beating with excitement. "Jameson," she shouted out. "I think I discovered something." Jameson came sprinting over, his eyes ablaze with eagerness. Emily handed him the box, and he promptly opened it up. Inside, they found a little camera and a set of instructions for how to install it. Jameson's expression got serious as he went over the instructions. "This isn't just any camera," he remarked. "It's a concealed camera. And the instructions specify that it's designed to be put in private sections of the business, like the CEO's office or the conference room." Emily felt a rush of sickness flood over her. "That's sick," she remarked. "Who would do anything like that?" Jameson shook his head. "I don't know," he answered. "But we need to get this camera to the lab and see if we can figure out who placed it." They swiftly collected up the camera and instructions and sneaked back out through the opening in the fence. As they drove back to the police station, Emily couldn't help but feel like they were getting closer to the truth. As they got at the lab, Jameson handed the camera and instructions over to the forensic team. They promised to get the findings back within a few days. Emily and Jameson sat down at a neighboring table, fatigued from the long day. Emily couldn't stop thinking about the camera and what it signified. If the firm was spying on their employees, what else were they capable of? Jameson could see the fear imprinted on Emily's face. "We'll work this out," he said. "We'll get to the bottom of it." Emily nodded, her mind swimming with options. She knew that they were getting closer to the truth, but she also knew that they were getting closer to danger. As the days passed, Emily and Jameson continued to work relentlessly on the case. They questioned more personnel, obtained more information, and put together the jigsaw little by bit. Finally, the findings from the lab came back. They had detected DNA on the camera, and it matched one of the company's senior executives. Emily's heart sunk as she read the news. She couldn't believe that someone in such a high position of authority could be capable of such filthy conduct. She understood that they had to move swiftly before the executive could conceal his tracks. With Jameson's aid, they acquired a warrant to search the executive's residence. They arrived to the executive's home in the early hours of the morning, and Emily's pulse was pumping with anticipation. They promptly examined the residence and uncovered further proof of the executive's wrongdoings. It was a big breakthrough in the case, and Emily felt a sense of relief rush over her. Yet she also realized that their task wasn't done yet. They had to make sure that the CEO was brought to justice and that the corporation had procedures in place to avoid anything like this from occurring again. For the following 3 weeks, Emily and Jameson worked feverishly to create a compelling case against the CEO. They collected witness accounts, gathered evidence, and worked closely with the district attorney to prepare for the trial. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. Emily sat in the courtroom, her pulse beating with nerves. She watched as the executive was brought in, his head held low. The evidence was overwhelming, and the executive had no choice but to plead guilty. He was sentenced to several years in prison, and the corporation was obliged to pay a substantial fine. Emily felt a sense of accomplishment as she walked out of the courtroom. She felt that justice had been served, but she also realized that they had to continue battling against corruption and misuse of power. As she and Jameson went back to their car, Emily felt a sense of thankfulness for her companion. She realized that she couldn't have done it without him. "Thank you," she replied, turning to him. "For everything." Jameson grinned. "You don't have to thank me," he added. "We create a good team." And as they drove away, Emily felt a sense of optimism. She realized that there was still so much work to be done, but she also knew that they were making a difference, one case at a time. Chapter 4: Uncovering the Truth. Emily sat at her desk, staring at the computer screen in front of her. She had been working on Sarah's case for weeks now, and still, she felt like she was no closer to locating her friend than she was when she started. She massaged her tired eyes and groaned, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. While she sat there, lost in contemplation, her phone chimed. It was a text message from Detective Jameson. "Hello, I need your aid. Can you meet me in the park in half an hour?" Emily's heart raced. She was delighted to have a new lead in the case, but also anxious about what it may imply for Sarah's safety. She hastily grabbed her coat and rushed out the door, her mind racing with options. As she made her way to the park, Emily couldn't help but think about the city she lived in. It was a place of beauty and danger, with towering buildings and bustling streets packed with people from all walks of life. Yet underneath the surface, there lurked a darkness that few knew about. A world of corruption and greed, where power and money dominated all. As Emily got in the park, she saw Jameson seated on a bench, staring off into the distance. He looked up as she came and nodded, motioning for her to sit down. "Emily, we've received a fresh lead in the case," Jameson stated, his voice low and serious. "I need your aid to follow up on it." "What is it?" Emily asked, feeling a burst of adrenaline. "We think we might have located the individual responsible for Sarah's disappearance," Jameson stated, his gaze riveted on hers. "But we need to be careful. This is a dangerous individual, and we don't know what they're capable of." Emily nodded, her heart beating in her chest. She was willing to do whatever it needed to find her companion and bring her home. Jameson pulled out a file from his backpack and opened it up, showing a series of images and paperwork. Emily moved in closer, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. "We've been watching this guy for months now," Jameson added. "And we suspect they could have something to do with Sarah's disappearance." Emily felt a knot grow in her gut as she glanced at the images. They were fuzzy and grainy, but she could make out a person moving through the darkness. She couldn't identify who it was or what they were doing, but she knew that it wasn't good. "What do you need me to do?" Emily questioned, her voice calm. "We need to get closer to this guy," Jameson remarked. "We need to find out what they're up to and what they know about Sarah. Yet we can't do it alone. We need your aid to get into their organization." Emily felt a thrill of exhilaration at the notion of going incognito. She had always dreamt of being a spy, and now here was her chance. "What do you need me to do?" Emily inquired again, her voice excited. "We need you to go undercover as a member of this individual's group," Jameson added. "We'll give you with a cover narrative and all the tools you need. So you need to be careful. This is a risky game we're playing, and one bad move may be your end." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of the duty on her shoulders. She realized that this was a perilous endeavor, but she was determined to do whatever it needed to bring her friend home. "All right," she answered, her voice steely. "What do I need to do?" Jameson leaned in closer, his gaze riveted on hers. "We need you to meet with this individual and acquire their trust. Find out what they know about Sarah and report back to us. So you need to be careful. This guy is considered to be merciless, and they won't hesitate to destroy anyone who poses a threat to them." Emily nodded, realizing the seriousness of the situation. She realized that this was a risk, but she was prepared to accept it if it meant finding her buddy. "I'll do it," she responded, her voice determined. Jameson grinned, a glint of relief in his eyes. "Good. I knew we could depend on you." He handed her the file and a little gadget. "This is a recording device. Use it to capture any discussions you have with this individual. Just remember, we're depending on you to keep yourself safe." Emily took the gadget and slid it into her pocket, feeling a mix of exhilaration and terror. She was about to enter a world of peril and deception, but she was determined to see it through. As she made her way back to her apartment, Emily couldn't help but think about the work ahead of her. She needed to become someone else totally, someone who could traverse the dirty underbelly of the city without getting discovered. That was a frightening undertaking, but she was ready for it. During the following 4 days, Emily immersed herself in her new persona. She studied the cover tale Jameson had given her, rehearsed her new accent, and learned everything she could about the individual she was going to see. She was determined to make this work, no matter what. Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. Emily put on her new clothing, slid the recording device into her pocket, and stepped out the door. She felt like a new person, someone who could blend in with the darkness and leave without a trace. When she made her way to the assigned place, Emily's pulse raced. She was going to see the person who could hold the key to Sarah's disappearance, and she didn't know what to expect. As she arrived to the filthy alleyway, Emily spotted a man waiting for her in the darkness. She approached cautiously, her senses on high alert. "Who are you?" the person inquired, their voice low and gravelly. Emily took a deep breath and began into her cover story. She was a fresh recruit, searching for a job in the company. She had talents and contacts, and she was willing to do whatever it needed to prove herself. The person listened closely, nodding occasionally. Emily felt a flush of relief. She was pulling this off. Eventually, the figure spoke. "You seem like you may be valuable to us," they remarked. "But we'll need to put you to the test first. Are you willing to prove yourself?" Emily nodded, experiencing a mixture of exhilaration and terror. She didn't know what the exam would be, but she was ready for anything came her way. Throughout the next 2 weeks, Emily worked hard to prove herself to the organization. She performed everything was requested of her, no matter how risky or unlawful. She formed contacts and acquired the trust of her fellow members, all while gathering information concerning Sarah's abduction. Eventually, Emily's hard effort paid off. She identified the person guilty for Sarah's disappearance, and she was able to bring them to justice. Sarah was reunited with her family, and Emily was lauded as a hero. As she sat in her apartment, fatigued yet fulfilled, Emily couldn't help but think about the adventure she had been on. She had gone from a lonely journalist to an undercover spy, risking her life to bring her companion home. It was a voyage she would never forget, one that had transformed her forever. And when she closed her eyes and went off to sleep, Emily realized that she had found her true calling. She had discovered a part of herself she never knew existed, and she was ready to take on any challenge that came her way. From that day on, Emily devoted herself to acting as a clandestine spy, utilizing her abilities and experience to aid others in need. She understood that the work was hazardous and often thankless, but she also knew that it was worth it. Years later, as Emily looked back on her life, she realized that she had made the correct choice. She had discovered a feeling of purpose and joy that she never imagined imaginable, and she had helped countless individuals along the way. And as she lifted a glass in toast to her own accomplishment, Emily couldn't help but feel thankful for the road that had led her to this moment. She knew that the path ahead would be long and arduous, but she was ready for whatever was ahead. Chapter 5. The Truth Unveiled. Emily stepped into the abandoned warehouse, her heart beating in her chest. She couldn't believe she was doing this. It was hazardous, dangerous even, but she had to find out what had happened to Sarah. Her companion had gone without a trace, and Emily was determined to get to the bottom of it. The chamber was barely lighted, and the air was heavy with the scent of must and rot. Emily's footsteps resonated through the empty area as she made her way to the center of the warehouse. She had been given clear directions on where to go and what to do once she got there, but she couldn't help feeling like she was heading into a trap. As she eventually reached the center of the warehouse, she spotted a man seated behind a desk. He was clothed in a suit, and his hair was slicked back. He looked up when Emily approached and offered her a sneaky grin. "Emily, I presume?" he continued, his voice smooth and assured. Emily nodded, feeling her palms start to sweat. "Yeah, that's me." The man indicated to a chair in front of his desk. "Please, have a seat." Emily paused for a bit before sitting down. She attempted to keep her expression neutral, but her mind was racing with questions. Who was this man, and what did he know about Sarah? "I presume you're here about your buddy, Sarah?" the guy remarked, reclining back in his chair. Emily nodded, feeling a knot grow in her gut. "Yes. I need to know what happened to her." The man's eyes narrowed, and he gave her a look that made her skin crawl. "I'm afraid you're too late for that, my darling." Emily's heart fell. She had come so close, but now it looked like her search had been for nothing. She took a deep breath and attempted to keep her voice calm. "What do you mean? What happened to Sarah?" The guy leaned closer, his eyes sparkling with a menacing brightness. "Let's just say that Sarah was coming a bit too close to the truth. And we couldn't have that, now could we?" Emily felt a cold run down her spine. She had heard whispers about big criminal groups operating in the city, but she never imagined they might be responsible for Sarah's abduction. "Who are you?" Emily demanded, her voice quivering slightly. "And what do you want?" The guy chuckled, a deep, throaty sound that made Emily's blood run cold. "I'm afraid I can't reveal that information, my darling. But I will say this. You would be prudent to leave this alone. We don't take well to curious little girls putting their noses where they don't belong." Emily tightened her teeth, her fists knotted in wrath. She wasn't going to let this man frighten her. She had come too far to turn down now. "I'm not leaving until you tell me what happened to Sarah," she added, her voice stern. The man's smile faded, and he grabbed for something on his desk. Emily stiffened, her gaze riveted on his hand. Was he going to whip out a weapon? But before she could respond, the door burst open, and a swarm of police officers raced into the room. Emily's heart jumped with relief when she spotted Detective Jameson among them. The man behind the desk stepped up, pulling out a revolver from his belt. Emily gasped, hiding behind the chair for shelter. She heard gunshots ring out, and she prayed that Jameson and his crew would be able to take down the man before he could harm anybody. After the firing stopped, Emily peered out from behind the chair. The man was laying on the ground, surrounded by police officers. Emily felt a feeling of relief rush over her. She had been so near to danger, but she was secure now. Detective Jameson approached her, his look grim. "Are you okay, Emily?" Emily nodded, her throat dry. "I'm okay." What happened?" Jameson sighed heavily. "We've been watching this group for months. We assumed they were behind Sarah's disappearance, but we didn't have any specific evidence until today. We got a tip that they were conducting a meeting here tonight, and we were able to catch them off guard." Emily's thoughts was spinning. She couldn't believe what had just transpired. What about Sarah? Is she still alive? Jameson's expression relaxed. "I'm sorry, Emily. We found her body a few days ago. It appears like she stumbled across something she shouldn't have, and they hushed her." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. She had been so close to finding out the truth, but now it felt like Sarah's death had been for nothing. Jameson put a hand on her shoulder. "We'll make sure they pay for what they did, Emily. Sarah deserved justice, and we won't rest until we receive it." Emily nodded, feeling a sense of resolve sweep over her. She had lost her buddy, but she wasn't going to let her death be in vain. She would help Jameson bring these crooks to justice, no matter what it took. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this creepy story from Midnight Murmurs. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of mystery and suspense. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, please leave them in the comments below. Until next time, sweet dreams or nightmares.